Today is Friday, August 14th, and Joe Turner and myself, Judy Meyer, are talking to our new mayor, Terry Briggs.
Well, thank you very much.
And
Enjoy
we
it.
are in your office, correct?
This is the mayor's office that you see here up at City Hall. This is our newer City Hall. We've been in here for maybe 6 years, 7 years, 6 years. No, about 6 years.
And how long have you been here?
I've been in Bridgeton, you mean as mayor?
Yeah, as mayor.
As mayor, I've only been in here 4 months, so I'm into the second quarter of my mayoral term.
I see.
Second 4 months.
Well, first thing is, we'd like to ask you how you got here, how you came to this position, starting with if you'll tell us where you were born.
Sure. I was born in St. Louis City. I was born at Old St. Mary's Hospital, which is down on Clayton Road in Clayton itself. My parents had an apartment down on what is now considered Forest Park Expressway. And so we grew up there, but then my father worked initially for Boeing, and to get closer there, and then they wanted a house, they moved to St. John, which is just down to the east of us here. I grew up in an old farmhouse that was one of the oldest houses in the city of St. John.
Wow.
And it had behind it the old cistern, which was turned into a garden area, like a rock garden for this lady behind us. The house had 14-foot ceilings, half a foot crown molding, which was actually carved, in walnut wood, which was beautiful. The house, though, itself, it started out as it was a coal burner, so we had the old coal chute that came into the basement area and everything like that, and then it got converted over to fuel oil. My parents raised myself, and I'm the oldest of 4 children.
Okay.
So we all lived there, and then back when we moved to Bridgeton in 1984, my parents followed us out to here to Bridgeton in 1994, 10 years later.
Well, now, since you lived in St. John's, where'd you go to school?
I went initially to grade school to Our Lady of the Presentation, which is at the corner of Tudor and Brown Avenue in St. John. When I was going, for those of the Catholic faith, we had all the nuns when I was a little kid.
Dressed in the habits?
Dressed in the habits, that's right. About 6th grade, they changed over, and the habits became new, and all of a sudden I realized, oh, nuns have hair. But I should have known that because I've got an aunt who's a nun.
Oh, okay.
And she is a hospital sister, but she's retired now as well. But anyway, yeah, I went there for 8 years, went 1 year to Mercy High School, and then transferred over to Rittner High School. I know people in Pattonville aren't going to like that because they always had the rivalry with Pattonville, but I did 3 years at Rittner Senior. My graduating class, because the chief and I were actually in the same graduating class. Chief Hood, the police chief. And what's amazing is people say, oh, then you knew each other. We didn't know each other. We had 1,000 people in our graduating class.
That's a big class, yes.
Yeah, and when I tell my relatives out in central Missouri, they go, that's bigger than some of our cities. Which is true.
Uh-huh.
And you kind of get lost. All we did at graduation was we all piled out onto the football field, and they just started reading names. And it took 3.5 hours to make it from A to Z.
Right.
Fortunately, as a B, I was up close.
Well, I graduated from Normandy. We had 600 in my graduate class, and my last name was an A.
Oh, you were close.
So it was kind of similar.
Normandy was one of the competitors.
Yes,
in
that's why.
Suburban North was Normandy, Pattonville, Rittner, the McClure schools, or Ferguson Florissant, they called it, Riverview.
Yes, exactly.
So,
exactly.
On Friday nights, that was the big thing, was to go to the football games.
Right, exactly
that
right.
was a big, big deal.
Yes. What did you do after graduation?
After high school, I went on to college. I'm a journalism major.
Oh,
at
really?
the University of Missouri.
Oh, okay.
So then once I got out of MU, I actually started working in the news media.
Oh, where? How?
I was in Fulton, Missouri for 2.5 years at a radio station there. I was the news director.
Is that what you wanted to do? Radio?
I liked journalism. Yeah, I liked it. I did TV out there. The University of Missouri Journalism School is a very well-renowned school. Part of it is they have their own radio stations. They have their own television station. They produce their own daily newspaper. So you get a whole gamut of what you're doing at MU in terms of they thrust you right into practical experience. So I did some of that for a while there in Fulton, and then I left that job and actually went to Mississippi for 2 years, and I was the correspondent for a statewide radio network at the legislature.
How'd you go to Mississippi?
Well, at MU they have an extensive career program where they list jobs and things, and one of my former classmates was the news director of this outfit, and he was getting ready to leave. He had seen, I was looking around anyway myself, and he saw I did, and he said, you ought to come down here and apply. The nice thing there was my wife is a native out of Mississippi, and so as a result, we had relatives, or she did, that lived right there in Jackson, Mississippi, which is the state capital. So it worked out real well, because you always, when you move somewhere and you don't know anybody, it's pretty lonesome at times.
Yes.
However, in this case, we had a whole family set up down there to where we had a lot of structure. Like she had 2 aunts, a bunch of cousins, her grandmother, her great aunt. Worked out fine that
That's
way.
quite remarkable.
And then I went to...
and what was your job there?
I was the assistant news director for a statewide radio network.
Wow.
A lot of people, I tell people, you meet a whole bunch of different interesting people in journalism. Mm-hmm. I interviewed Ronald Reagan for about 20 minutes sitting in the back of a car while he was going to a rally before he became president. I interviewed Jimmy Carter's mother, Miss Lillian, if you remember her.
A little bit.
Yeah, so she came by the office one day and I was given the assignment to interview her. Meet a lot of different people. I met Henry Aaron, the baseball player.
Oh, wow. So you were a reporter as well as...
I was a reporter as well as working the administrative side of it. And then I was on air too.
Wow, a little bit of everything.
I did have to do it. Had to do sports a little bit at times, and down there agriculture was a big deal, so I had to give farm reports occasionally.
So you said you apparently were already married when you went to Mississippi.
We were. My wife and I married when she got out of college.
Where did she go to school?
She was an MU graduate as well. I met her when we were both out of Columbia.
Okay, and what is her name?
Lori. She is a special education teacher.
Oh, okay.
So she started out in economics. She was going to be an accountant for a while. Lasted about 1 year and said no, education was kind of where it was leaning for her. So she went into that. It's interesting, in our family, my grandmother was a teacher in a single classroom out in rural Missouri.
Wow.
My father was a teacher. My wife is a teacher, but that's where it's kind of going to end after 3 generations of teachers, because none of my children want to be teachers. They're all into something else.
Well, sometimes they change.
They could. Maybe I've got 2 granddaughters, and maybe one of them will go back into teaching.
Quite possible. And sometimes they teach other things.
They do.
Not always classroom teaching, but other things as well. So where does, let me ask you, when you moved from Fulton to Mississippi, did your wife work there?
She taught 1 year, and then the first child came along, so then she stopped teaching.
How many children do you have?
We have 3, Josh, Jeremy, and Haley. And we had them kind of close together. They're all in their 30s right now, but they're only 2 years apart.
And were they raised in Mississippi?
No, ironically, Josh was born here in St. Louis. We were on vacation, and my wife gave birth up here while we were on vacation.
That's a nice way to spend your vacation.
Yeah, it was. And so then the middle one, Jeremy, he was born in Mississippi, but they were always, the first 2 were premature, so they were in the hospital for 6 weeks,
Wow.
both of them. And as a result, he never actually stayed in the house we owned in Mississippi or rented in Mississippi. And then the youngest, Haley, she was born in Jefferson City. That's where we moved the last time before moving back to St. Louis.
Okay, how did you come by going to Jefferson City then?
I applied for a job. It was time to look for other things. Part of the thing in journalism is it doesn't pay very well, especially in radio. And so when you start having a family, you've got to decide, am I going to stay along this line, or am I going to look for something else? So I applied and got a job in Mississippi, or in Jeff City, working as a governmental relations director for a nonprofit that helps people with disabilities.
Oh, okay.
And so I would go to the Capitol in Jefferson City and lobby on behalf of individuals with disabilities about changing things around. One of the biggest things we had there was Guardianship Law. In the state of Missouri, when we were first here, they used to refer to people with mental disabilities as idiots. And that was actually the term that was in the state statute. So
That's sad, isn't it?
It is. And we changed all that. I worked a lot with a former state senator and the first woman lieutenant governor, Harriet Wood. She was the sponsor of the bill. And so we worked together, got a coalition of people. It took us about 2 years to get it changed, but we finally got her done. And so we stayed up there in Jefferson City for about 2.5 years. And then we moved back to St. Louis in 1984 when we found Bridgeton.
Why did you move back to St. Louis? Another
Got
job?
another new job.
And
Yeah.
where and what was this all about?
My job then was with the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. And I was the PR person or spokesperson for the Metropolitan Sewer District. So just like we're doing now on video, I would be the person, if there was an issue with the media, I would be the one that would have to go out and explain what happened. If a sewer collapsed and the building collapsed into that sewer, I would be the one that would have to explain it to the public what went on.
That kind of puts you in a bad position, doesn't
There
it?
was a little bit of heat at times.
Yes.
I know, some of the worst meetings were when you had to go out and explain to people why their basements backed up with
Oh,
sewage.
yes.
Not very pleasant.
No.
I remember one such meeting up in Hazelwood where there's about 200 people, and they didn't tell me they'd have this kind of a crowd. Normally, if we're going to have that, we would have sent 2 or 3 people. But I was the only one there, and
Oh,
they
boy.
were pretty upset.
Uh-huh.
Get called a lot of names, unfortunately.
Ooh. Oh.
But, part of it is it thickens up your skin that way a little bit. People like to vent, get it off their chest, and that's basically what they were doing.
How long did you work for Metropolitan Sewer District?
I was with MSD for almost 18 years, about 2 months short of 18.
And so you retired from there?
No, I
No?
actually moved to another job. It
Oh.
sounds like I've had a lot of jobs, but
Yes.
it's not that many. I went
Okay.
to work for a construction contractor group called SITE, and they're a trade association. They're composed of a bunch of different contractors, some of whom I got to know when I was at MSD because they were sewer contractors. So the contractors that I represent now do what they call as horizontal building. In other words, it might be roads or sewers, utilities, concrete work, landscapers, asphalt pavers, highway builders. It's nobody that does buildings like this structure we're in now.
Oh.
And I've worked there for nearly 14 years.
Oh. So you're presently still working for them?
I am presently still working, yes.
I see. So is the office of Mayor of Bridgeton, it's not a full-time position then?
It is not.
Oh, okay. I
Even-
think maybe a lot of people may not have known that.
I think that's the case because the previous mayor had started when he was still working as well, and he'd been here for quite a long time. However, he eventually retired his other job, and then it gave him some more time to be here directly, full-time almost, at the city of Bridgeton.
Mm-hmm.
There aren't that many in the city or in St. Louis County. The mayor of Florissant is full-time. The mayor of the city of St. Louis is full-time. But beyond that, most of the mayors in St. Louis County are part-time jobs.
Do you know, I know you haven't been in office a real long time, but do you know, do they ever have a get-together, the different mayors? Do they have like a lunch or
I
breakfast?
just had one yesterday.
No, really?
Yes, it's called the Metro Mayors Association. It's composed of the mayors of all cities in St. Louis County that are of 10,000 population and above. We meet and we discuss various issues that affect all of us jointly. One issue that's come up recently is the legislature in the last year passed a bill called Senate Bill 5, which dictates how many tickets you can write in terms of the revenue that's brought in.
Oh,
Some
yes,
of our-
that's been in the
It's
news.
been a hot topic
Yes.
issue, correct. Now in Bridgeton, our revenue, we only generate just under 3% is coming from fines and fees from court. Other communities, 30%, 25%, and that's what the legislature was trying to kind of correct it.
How many mayors were there, do you think?
We had about 18.
Oh, okay.
We had the mayors of St. Anne, which is our neighbor to the east. We had the mayor of Webster Groves is the chair of it. The mayors, some of them are mayors out of St. Charles County. Mayor Pagano out of St. Peters was there. A couple other different ones. Some of them I knew from my past job as MSD. The mayor of Bellefonte Neighbors, I'd known him for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a nice forum in which we can all go over things that affect us all.
Right.
And we can bounce ideas off each other and say, did this work in your community? If it did, or fine. If it didn't, so much. The county executive addressed us about he's been in office now, I guess, about 8 months. So he gave us kind of a briefing on his first 8 months in office.
Where was the meeting held?
We were over in Kirkwood.
Does it rotate every year?
No, I didn't, because it was my first meeting. I'm not sure how they do it. They do rotate who the chairperson is, and I guess the chair gets to select the venue at which they're at.
Okay. Did anyone else go with you from Bridgeton?
No, usually this is only mayors.
I see.
So,
I see.
and I guess for that, they like it to be kind of candid.
So do you take your own notes then?
I do take my own notes. I put down, I'm a scribbler.
Okay.
If you give me like the agenda, I will put notes on the agenda as opposed to taking a tablet in.
Yes.
I don't put them on napkins though, so people you'll see writing things on napkins and things like that. They don't hold up, but the agendas do. And so I'll take a note or two and then I'll check on it when I get back to say, well, you might try it this way because such and such a city does this, or a problem was addressed this way in whatever city, and you might call them and see how they did it, how they handled it.
So you moved back from our state capital.
Yes.
So how long have you, and when you moved back, did you move back then to Bridgeton?
We did. We've been in Bridgeton for 31 years. We moved in February of 1984.
Was there any certain reason why you chose Bridgeton?
We liked it for the central location. You know, grew up in St. John. My wife grew up in an unincorporated area of St. Louis County. Her parents lived there off Ross Road in Olive. So we were kind of in between. We found her parents knew the owner of the house that we're in.
Oh.
And so that helped us out in terms of finding a location. But I've always liked it because you've got the two highways here with 270 and 70. I grew up by the airport, so it really didn't bug me that much to hear the planes coming over all the time or anything like that. But it had a nice location, and one thing that helped us too was the parks.
Oh.
I can remember as a kid coming out into Bridgeton because both my sister and my youngest brother played ball out here.
Really?
At Apple Tree, when it was a brand new subdivision, which happens to be, I live in the Bridgeway subdivision, and that's their park. It's called Bridgeway Park now.
Oh.
When we first came out here, it used to be called Apple Tree Park. And the only way we'd come down was off of a private road called Apple Tree Lane. And you'd park down there, because the ball field, that's the closest way to get to the ball field, as opposed to hiking it up the hill. So we've known a lot about Bridgeton, and we always thought it was a nice community, and sure enough, it is.
Wonderful. Now, when you came to Bridgeton, you had the 3 children.
Yeah.
And where did they go to school?
They all went to Bridgeway School. My daughter has a disability, so she was in special district, and at times she's fluctuated around between different schools that provided certain services that she was needing. So she's bounced around a little bit. She was actually at Remington School, which is down on Fifi, just inside Maryland Heights. And then she also, though, went to the high school, as did my 2 boys.
So they're all
Pattonville graduates.
Mm-hmm.
They are. Very proud of it, too.
Even though Pattonville High School isn't really within the Bridgeton boundaries, we kind of claim it, don't we?
Well, we do, and the old one is. It's up there where Holman Junior High is, and then I can remember when it was the old stadium there. Had the track and the football field.
Right.
And you'd come by on Friday nights, just like we talked earlier.
Yes.
See the lights going on with the football game.
True.
And so, I always considered Pattonville pretty much Bridgeton myself, but I know the people in Maryland Heights, they're split there. They've got both Parkway and Pattonville. And St. Anne has a little that they can claim.
Well, for a long time, people in Bridgeton used a Pattonville postmark.
That's correct. That's exactly
When you,
it.
after you were established in your home, when did you get interested maybe in some of the extra, workings of the city? Were you in politics in any way?
The only thing with MSD, what I had to do in addition to being the spokesman for it, I also had the governmental relations side. So I had to establish contacts with various cities. I can remember a couple of the council members out here in Bridgeton. We took them on a tour. We actually put them into a sewer so they could see what it was.
A sewer?
Mm-hmm.
Where was this sewer?
It was over, the 2 council members were Rich Collier and Joe Dobrnick. And Rich Collier actually had a manhole in his driveway. And so...
A manhole in his driveway?
Yeah. And so we popped that off. We had a crew come up and said, okay, if you wanted to see it, here we go. And we put him on in a harness.
Oh my goodness!
Dropped him down in there.
Wow!
Was he 6 feet under?
Yeah, he probably was. The sewer was about 10 foot deep.
Wow.
But we've taken other people, when I was with MSD down in the city, where you literally come into a sewer, they hook you up like a tripod like you're shooting on today, and they hook you in a harness, and you literally are free falling down. They just drop you so you can swing like a pendulum.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, some of the sewers in the city are huge.
And they also have underground, what, tunnels or things?
They do have, there was an underground tunnel. Some of that's gone now. There used to be an underground tunnel that ran to the Post-Dispatch, at which they'd run the paper for the print. And about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, they finally got rid of that tunnel. But some of those sewers, everything when you first looked at the sewer system, it was established basically by enclosing creeks in the city. So they just, because what they did was they would just dump all their waste into the creek and it flowed to the river and it was somebody else's problem.
Somebody else's problem.
Yeah, so finally it got to the point that it was contamination and it caused disease, like there was a big typhoid outbreak in St. Louis. And people said, well, it must be because of this, so they started breaking in the old sewers. Or the old creeks, excuse me. And so they would break in the creek, but because the creek also handled stormwater, you had to make it huge because on a storm event, you would have a lot more flow going through there than a dry day. And so that's why your sewer system is so big in the city. It's what they call a combined sewer. It handles both stormwater and wastewater or sewage in it. And some of those in the city are 26.5 feet. The largest one that they've got is 32 feet in diameter.
Wow.
That's a pretty good size sewer.
Yes, yes.
Very big sewer.
Right,
We
wow.
don't have that size in Bridgeton.
Well, speaking of problems and issues, the former mayor, Bowers, he faced several challenges such as airport expansion, tornadoes, so forth. What do you feel like your biggest challenges are going to be, just right now?
Right now, well, we have the ongoing issue with our landfill, which it's really twofold. It is a burning landfill called the Bridgeton landfill that emits odors. Then we also have the landfill Westlake that has hazardous materials that were deposited into it. First priority is to get the fire put out, or whatever. They don't want to call it a fire, but basically I think it is to put that out and cause the odors to stop as much as possible. They've worked on some things. I know some people aren't happy with the progress. I would have liked it to be over with, as I know other people would as well. But that's the first priority. Second one, because they discharged this radioactive waste here back in '73, it's been a long time. It needs to be resolved one way or the other. Either you're going to keep it all encapsulated, and by encapsulated I mean all around, not just on the top, sides, and the bottom, or you dig it up and get rid of it. Digging it up and getting rid of it is a very expensive proposition.
And where do you take it?
Well, that's the issue.
Where do you go with
Who wants
it? Right, exactly.
That's part of the problem we've got. But what irritates me a little bit on the whole issue is I've seen other communities around St. Louis, like Weldon Springs and up in Hazelwood, where the federal government has done something. And it just seems like, well, then when is it Bridgeton's turn to have it done? Because you're taking care of these other issues, but you're not doing Bridgeton. That's my one issue there. The other issue that I think we need to do is, as a community that continues to prosper, and I think we do, we need to make sure, though, we keep up our property values by keeping our appearances. I always tell people the first thing that hits you when you come into a town, if you see rows of gardens or well-kept lawns and buildings look nice, you think this is a nice community. They've got it together. Conversely, if you run into an area where there's derelict buildings, a lot of graffiti, the weeds are growing too high, the houses are run down looking, you get the impression, boy, what's going on here? Do I really want to locate in this town? Most people would say no. So I think one of the challenges that we have is Bridgeton's an older community. We have to keep up with our appearances. And for the most part we have, but we need to keep vigilant about that. We need to make sure that people, if we say, hey, your weeds need, your grass needs to be cut, you need to go ahead and cut it. Otherwise, we're going to have to fine you or something, and I hate to do that. But it's all part of keeping the values, the property values up and keeping your property looking nice. Those are the things I'm looking at. Obviously, like other things, we need to keep our commercial, industrial base going. so that it doesn't impact us as residents of the city. You know, if we have a good commercial base, good industrial base, then we don't have to hike the taxes nearly as much, which is good.
Do you feel there are businesses still coming into Bridgeton?
Yes, I do. There are businesses coming into our city. Every month we get inquiries about it.
Wonderful.
And that's what I think too. You know, one of the things though, we've had a few that kind of got scared off with the odors. So that's why that issue has to be resolved as well. I don't want to have anything out there that people say, no, I'm not going to go to that town just because there's something that we can do ourselves. If somebody says, no, I need to be by, I don't know, an active rail line or something, even though we've got one here in Bridgeton, you know, I can't compete with something like that. But if I can say, oh, your air is as clean as anybody else's, then we should be.
We just interviewed a couple of weeks ago John Bell down at BMAC.
BMAC.
Yes, and we brought up the topic of what happened last year where a group claimed that there was radioactive material down there at the fields and it wouldn't be safe for children and so forth. And he reassured us that they had it tested and the ground was just fine.
That's exactly the point, and I've raised that issue with these people before as well. That one kind of irritated me. My own kids played at BMAC.
Yes, I think all of ours did.
All of ours did. I was down at BMAC. I mean, I was their coach, so I'm out there in the dust as much as any of those kids at times. Don't think that I'm adversely affected by anything. I thought it was premature to level an allegation out there and it was picked up so much by the media that they thought, oh my gosh, you know, because we've had inquiries about hosting tournaments out there at BMAC. And people say, well, you know, I'm a little fearful about going out there because I saw the article about it being contaminated. It is not contaminated. I had asked EPA and they sent us a letter saying it is suitable for all types of activity that way. Yes, maybe along the creek, there's a little creek that runs out that way. They may have found a little trace amounts. But people also need to understand there's trace amounts of radioactivity in all kinds of dirt, regardless. Do I like it? No. Just like I said, we need to resolve the issue with Westlake Landfill. But don't go around making accusations about this stuff and then it has a long-term effect on the city.
Yes, in many ways.
And that's where I have a problem with that.
Yes, in many ways. Well, getting back, actually, what I was wondering was, before you were mayor, were you on any of the commissions or council member, whatever?
I was. I started out, actually, people forget this probably, but I was on the airport commission here for about a year. Then I transitioned over to parks. And I was with the Parks Commission for a number of years. I was here when we actually people did pass a bond issue, which helped us build the new Aqua Center up there at the community center and improvements out at BMAC. Then because we have term limits so that we can get fresh ideas and fresh people on, I was turned out of Parks and I went over to the Personnel Commission, which I headed. I was the chairman of that for 4 years. And then I was on the Board of Adjustment as an alternate for a while.
I see. So you've kind of made the rounds of several of the commissions.
I have made the rounds here in Bridgeton a little bit.
I see.
And then before I became mayor, I did try and attend as many of the council member meetings as I could. And I think I was missed about 2 handfuls, and that's it over a 4-year period. I think you've got to kind of understand what the dynamics are of the council as well as with the previous administration to kind of get a feel for, okay, this is what happens, can it be done differently, and so forth. And that was one of the intriguing parts about the job.
Well, we have a new facility being built, even as we speak, our community center. Were you involved in that in any way?
I was not involved with that directly. They had the campaign, I was supportive of it. We should have the new community center up and running by January. We had a few little delays from some other things, but it should be ready to go. One of the things we need to do at the community center is we need to get the younger crowd back into it. From what I understand from talking to the parks people and everything, it is a great facility, which I believe, but it's dominated by individual seniors use it, and that's great, but we also have a lot of younger people here that we need to say, look, there's opportunities here for you at the community center. Why don't you come and try this for a while?
When you say young people, do you mean children teenagers or young adults?
Young adults with young kids.
Okay.
That's what I'm looking at. We do have some
Okay.
teenagers that use it. The basketball courts appear to be pretty full, usually on weekends and things like that. But we need to bring the young families back into it.
Well, I know they have several activities that, they try, the Sweetheart Ball and the She and Me Fairy Tea. I've done that with my granddaughter, and the Pirate. And I know that that must draw on, well, not necessarily young families, but they seem like they're successful activities.
Those are, and those are very good. What I'm looking for is, can we get some of them though to use just the facilities themselves? Those are what I call like special events.
Yes, true.
How can we get them though to maybe every once a week or something like that? And that's one of the reasons why when you go up to the new community center in January, you will see that the Aqua Center is more of an interactive. It's not just a lap pool, and I swim laps, so. But it's not that. It's one of these things where you'll see slides or you'll see water shooting out, things like that. It has a zero entryway. It's like the beach where you can come in on that. Because that's apparently, from what I'm told, and I kind of do believe it as well, that's the thing that attracts the younger families. When you have toddlers, obviously you have to have something more than just sitting in the water.
Well, that's true. I remember taking my son and daughter to the Bridgeton indoor pool for birthday parties, and when you're real little, and I'm short, and being in that pool, it's a challenge for me. I'm not much of a swimmer, so it was always a challenge. But I do think the walking track
Agreed.
will be a really nice addition. And of course, the machines, although I don't use them, but I think a lot of young and old people like
They
those.
do. One of the trends is fitness. People
Right.
are into fitness now. The previous center, while it was great and everything, we've actually had to convert. If you remember, it had a lot of racquetball courts, still does. Well, and that's because racquetball was very popular at the time it was built. And for a while, we had all those courts rented out. Well, what happened? Racquetball's kind of fallen off. People aren't playing it as much anymore. We converted one of those courts actually into a little fitness area. But you can only fit so many treadmills or bikes, stationary bikes, and so forth into it. The new facility will actually be a fitness center where you will have numerous types of machines that you see at some of the larger facilities where people can go out and actually, I guess, work out, at their own pace, whatever they choose to be.
I think that will attract
I think it
younger
will.
people.
That's what the hope is, that you will see some new faces coming back to the community center. But rest assured, it's not that we're getting rid of all the other programs. There'll still be the senior programs that are administered out of the community center, because those are important, and there are a lot of people that use those and depend on them. And
I think so too.
that's why we got to keep them going.
When I hear the different trips, the bus trips they take, and it sounds so good to me, and some of them I think even have a waiting list to do.
They do, and one of the things they always tell people, and I tell my mother, she lives across the street from us, get involved with some of this stuff. The more you get involved and take these little trips and things, I think it helps to keep you young. Myself, that's just my own little wisdom on the deal. But
Yes, and I certainly agree to that. When we were driving over here, Joe mentioned something that I think we'd like to ask you about. We had a meeting, I think it was this winter, from a group called Better Together.
Yeah.
Is there been any more talk or anything else going on with that? Can you explain a little bit about
Better
that?
Together is an effort that was put forth by some so-called civic-minded people, financed by some deep-pocket people, in which they want to try and see whether or not the community, and by community we're not just talking Bridgeton, the entire St. Louis city and county, seeing whether or not it'd be better for the community to get together and merge. We saw some of this in the state legislature with the passage of what they called Senate Bill 5, which was on the court deal, where there were some elements in St. Louis County where they were charging fairly high court rates, and their whole issue was to generate money for their city. And you had others like Bridgeton where that's never been the reason for writing tickets, is to generate money. It's just to keep the law and keep everybody abiding. Actually, that came up, we mentioned about the Metro mayors, that's a hot topic for them as well. You know, I see it as Bridgeton has been around for a long time, one of the oldest communities in the St. Louis County. Why do we want to blend it all together with anybody else? Some of the other communities in the county, unfortunately, they're so small, their tax base is so limited that they struggle in terms of how do they supply services to the residents.
And so could some of them combine together?
They might combine those together, and looking at some of that may be the area, but in communities like Bridgeton or Maryland Heights or some of the other larger areas, why would you need to if you're satisfied with your services? And for the most part, I get the impression from talking to people, they think the services here in Bridgeton are pretty good. Police are good. One of the things that people always rave about is that Bridgeton on snow events, or one of the first streets will get cleaned out. You come to Bridgeton, the streets are clean.
Thank goodness.
Pass out of it, yeah.
Thank goodness. That's so important.
It is. You know, you go on the highway, and MoDOT's got a lot of highways to do, but our streets are generally better than MoDOT's in terms of snow removal.
Yeah, yes, that's just so important. And
so I don't see getting back to better together. They want to look at not just the cities, they want to look at school districts, fire districts, and on and on and on. Part of the problem we have a lot of municipalities in the county, 91 of them.
Wow.
So some developers at times have said, oh, you got to go through all this red tape. Each community has this kind of a requirement, and then you got to do this, blah, 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 blah. I don't know, it's that bad really to begin with. Maybe there'll be exceptions to it, as there always are, but that was one of the impetuses behind it as well. Can we streamline government in St. Louis County? And streamline maybe a little of it, and like I said, maybe some of the smaller communities need to consider what they're doing. But in terms of our community, I don't think we need this.
Okay. Is it an ongoing issue? You said you just talked about this at your meeting.
Yeah, it is an ongoing issue.
Okay.
I mean, all of the mayors in the county that were at this meeting, basically there isn't any support for what their activities are.
Okay. Well, thank you for explaining that and kind of giving us a nice update on this.
Yeah, I think, we did have a meeting here in Bridgeton about police services, and I attended that meeting, and the vast majority, I didn't hear one person that said we needed to combine or get rid of our police and let somebody else like the county. It's nothing against the county's police. We have very good police force.
Well, speaking of police, okay, an incident just happened on Highway 70 where protesters blocked both directions to Highway 70. Were the Bridgeton police involved in that?
We were. At the request of the Missouri Highway Patrol, they asked us to send some officers out there to stand with the patrol officers in terms of settling down the commotion. We had protesters that basically blocked I-70.
Yeah.
You can't do that. You
Right.
have to keep that road open. They let it go on for a little bit. Finally, they had to say, look, you got to give it up. And when they didn't, then they had to be arrested. You had to have police help them with that. We've had a few officers that have had to go to Ferguson. Unfortunately, that community's been through a lot with turmoil. One of the nice things in our community is that we cooperate with each other. If one community needs help, we're willing to do it, just like when we had the tornado, a lot of other people came to Bridgeton's assistance as well. And we're grateful for that. And that's the way it should be. That's what makes communities strong. It binds them together.
Speaking of tornado, were you affected where you live in that Good Friday tornado?
The Good Friday tornado was about a half mile from our house. It was one of the times when we all went to the basement, and it was over in like 30 seconds. But I mean, the neighbor right across the street from us lost a couple trees, and she was a single lady in her 80s, so we had to go over and help her cut the trees off her house and everything like that. We didn't experience the damage that people did up on Old St. Charles Road. My mother lost some of her power. She lives across the street from us. We actually never even lost power at the house. We were one of the fortunate ones. But, again, we have a system, and we're looking at, like out in the Spanish Village area, making sure we get a new siren placed out there. You need to keep on top of those things. It's taken us a while. A few people are still recovering from the tornado to try and rebuild. You can see that on Old St. Charles Road itself. But for the most part, the residents of Bridgeton bounced back from it very nicely.
Yes, that's very, very encouraging. Very, very much. Did your children, since they went to high school here. Did they work part-time while they were in high school in this community? Did they have part-time jobs or summer
They did not,
jobs?
they did have summer jobs, but it wasn't in this community. One of them worked he was a golfer, so he worked down at a golf course there in the floodplain area, but it was over toward Creek Core. The other one's in construction, so he wasn't working much here.
I see.
They didn't work in the city much.
Okay. And where do they live now, your sons?
Well, one son does live here. He's in transition, so he's still with us, and my daughter's going to be with us for a while yet. And then my middle son with the 2 grandchildren lives down in Webster Groves.
Oh, so you have grandchildren.
2 little girls.
Oh, wonderful.
So yeah, they like the Webster Groves area.
Well, that's fine,
Yeah,
but
it's a nice community.
do they come up for any of our activities? Does Grandma and Grandpa bring them to Bridgeton for any of our fun activities?
They do come up. We utilize the park. One of the nice things I liked where I lived, which is the Bridgeway subdivision, is we have a park that's within walking distance. And so we go up to the park, and the one just loves to slide. I mean, I have a hard time keeping up with her at times. She just wants to go up and down that slide all the time. But it's nice to have those things in a community. That's one of the things you look for. You know, do you have amenities like a park system in place that you can go to, like a community center that you can go to, and we do in Bridgeton, and we value those things.
Right, right. Well, just a few more questions. What made you desire to become the mayor of Bridgeton?
I've always had an interest in the politics. I've known a lot of the council members at times. A couple of them had suggested maybe you ought to consider doing this. I knew a lot from my days with the sewer district to kind of understand local government and how it worked. And I thought, you know, I do have an understanding of it. I knew there was that the current mayor, you know, he was in there for 28 years. There comes a time when there is going to be a change. You know, he announced he wasn't going to run again. I had already announced I was going to run prior to that, so I didn't know for sure what he was going to do. But I thought, you know, it's time. The kids had grown, so it wasn't an issue with them. The timing just was right, and I have an interest in giving back to the community. You know, and it's sincere. I've been on some other. I served on a school board for a while, the special school district board. I served on a county board that distributes money for individuals with disabilities. So I've always had an interest in giving back into the communities where we live. And this is a prime opportunity to do it. And I'm glad the residents of Bridgeton decided, yeah, it was your time.
Well, Mayor Briggs, we really thank you for letting us come and talk with you. And it's been really nice getting to know you and
That's great.
talking about some of the issues that are important here in Bridgeton. And I hope I hope you just have a great term of office.
Well, thank you, Judy, and I'm looking forward to it. And hopefully with the support of all the residents, we're going to do just fine here in the city of Bridgeton.
Thank you.